All right, we are live. Oh, hold on.
Like one frame issues and there's no audio coming through.
That's not good. Yeah. We had a hard time last week at the beginning and started losing people, and I'm hoping that won't happen. So have they heard anything?
I mean, I'm not hearing anything. I'm looking at it right now, and people are saying that no one is getting sound.
Okay.
So I let them know we're looking into it. Okay. I'll let you know if anything comes in. Testing.
Yeah, I just got a text too saying we're not up. All right. Yeah, the thing is my fear is if we have people coming week after week and we don't have this thing working.
Do you have I was I wouldn't worry too much about that. I was on What Are You Memes channel like a couple of weeks ago, and the stream was 2 hours delayed because he had so many technical errors, and we still had like hundreds of people showing up.
Wow.
So let's see here. Someone says audio is back, but I'm not seeing audio. Good now. Starting to hear audio. People are saying.
Okay.
There we go. That's coming through now.
Okay. So, well, we're going to start from scratch. We apologize.
Start from scratch. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the. Yeah. Just kidding. You thought that we went silent again. Hey, we're with Michael Jones from Inspiring Philosophy. As we asked him if you couldn't hear, I'm going to have him briefly state it again. I said he's crushing it on the YouTube world with nearly 150,000 subscribers, well over 100,000, and just doing a great job. Michael, just talk to us for a moment about what got you into doing what you're doing, in case people missed it.
Sure. Yeah. So what got me into it, I was just annoyed by the amount of atheists on YouTube. And I was like, someone's got to do something about this. So I started making a couple of videos, and it wasn't supposed to be a big channel or anything, but it started to snowball a little bit. So I just decided to keep going, and here I am now.
Yeah, and some of the videos that I noticed that you do, you take on a lot of different issues that you don't see come up in everyday popular level apologetics. You'll get into things like panentheism. We have a question that came in about that. We'll get to that in our program. You'll have some interesting takes on some stuff as well. How did you get into this whole thing called philosophy, and how do you choose your topics? What makes you decide what you need to do a video on?
I kind of go what I feel like is the most important thing, or something that's really going to help edify the church and teach people, and also interesting things that I find fascinating. So, like, that's what got me into quantum mechanics and structuralist theories with regards to evolution, as well as I'm trying to understand Genesis in its Hebraic context, things like that. And the upcoming videos I'm going to be doing on monotheism as well. So for me, it's a number of just different topics that I just find fascinating, and I think other people would find fascinating.
So we do have some questions that are rolling in. I have a text that came through and said we are getting sound, but the voice is out of sync. So I just say that for Tim, who's working on some technical stuff while Michael and I are hashing through this conversation.
Tim, hurry up.
Yeah, let's make it happen.
Yeah, Tim.
Here's a question for you, Michael, from John Hamby. Hello, Inspiring Philosophy. I've seen your video on Christianity and panentheism to gain your perspective on what you believe about God and how he relates to the cosmos. My question is, are you more of a classical theist like Edward Fesser and Brian Davies, or a theistic personalist like Plantinga or William Lane Craig? What's your reasoning?
I mean, I know a theistic personalist is try to emphasize the transcendence and the immanence of God, and I would agree with that. I see the distinctions here are kind of very slim. I feel like I could go either way when it comes to that, but I do probably agree with Alvin Plantinga on that. So probably that. I do think that there is a transcendence and an immanence of God that is there, and that's what the personalist is trying to get at. And that's what some of the early church fathers were trying to describe, like Clement of Alexandria, from where we got the essence energy distinction, from where my video on weak panentheism came from.
Yeah, I saw that video myself a week or so ago, Michael. And when you hear the word panentheism, obviously to be distinguished from pantheism, all is God, panentheism, all in God. And I know that you don't tend to hear that talked a lot about broadly, where you could see a person holding Christian beliefs and panentheism. Why don't you just share with us how you think that the two of those can hold together?
The immanence and transcendence is what you mean?
With panentheism, like how all can be in God, like your form of panentheism, this weaker version of it.
Right. So we're not saying that we are part of like the mind of God. We would say God is omniscient. A strong panentheist, someone like Hegel, would say that, this is like God's way of discovering more about himself, and we're part of the mind of God kind of thing. Yeah. And I wouldn't say that. It's more just sort of like God has sort of like a mental reality that he's able to sort of project out from his energies in that sense. And then we are contingent on God, but we're not part of the mind of God. So you could think of it sort of like an analogy. J.R. Tolkien can imagine the world of Middle Earth, and you could say all those characters are dependent on him, but they are not part of his actual mind, his personal self in that sense. They're creations of him in that sense. And likewise, we could be creations of God, yet still contingent upon him, and yet we're not part of God's knowledge, his mind, what makes him who he is.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen the video that Michael did, check that out at Inspiring Philosophy at his YouTube channel. It was just recently done, wasn't it? Like a couple weeks ago? Or has that been up?
No, that's been up for a while.
Okay. Well, I've watched several of them, so maybe I can't keep up with which one I saw. Benjamin Minton wants to know how you got started, Michael, in philosophy, and what your study devotion time is like. So a little bit about your study habits. I remember asking you, and you said you try to read 2 hours a day taking copious notes. I don't know if it's changed since then, but kind of what is your, habits like?
Well, I try to read at least 30 pages a day from a book. But my study habits, now that I'm doing this full time, it's been able to expand it. When I was working a full time job, I would still try to read 30 pages a day,
That's what you
like
said.
on
Yeah.
like on my lunch break or in the evening, or sometimes in the morning if I woke up early. But now that I'm doing this full time, I'm able to do a little bit more. And that's why I'm going to start trying to do 3 videos a month because I'll have more time on that. So what I do is I read a book with a highlighter and I'll highlight the important parts I want to remember. And then from there, I will also, when I'm going to write a script, I'll make like an outline of notes and stuff, get kind of an idea. And that also helps me to remember stuff. Like my recent debate with Matt Dillahunty, I took meticulous notes. I have this giant outline of possible objections you could bring up and how I would reply to them. And that helps to really nail in information I want to remember. So I can be able to bring it up easily. So highlighter, outlines, reading a little bit every day is what is probably the best way to go.
Yeah, I know for me, it's varied at different times how I go about studying as well. I have to think about what approaches. A lot of times I've been in professional programs and it just kind of keeps the grid going for me. At other times, Audible's been a big part of my life for 5 or 6 years. Teaching myself to speed listen's been really helpful. So, I'm probably working through 100+ books a year on Audible. Many of them are the great classics. And if you can listen double, triple speed, that can help. But I think what you're saying with highlighting is a great thing. And one of the things too is like processing tons of information. Sometimes it's better to slow down and do what you're doing, reading 30 pages, really mastering an argument. And I think probably the thing that I would guess that you get, Michael, is I know for me, if I read and then if I can reflect on it, and then if I can talk to somebody about it. And I think that obviously you're reading it and then you're reflecting it because you put these videos together, and that's sort of like teaching it. Do you feel like that allows your content to solidify the process you go through in making a visual video? Do you feel like that helps you as a learner?
Oh, of course. I mean, teaching is a really great way to learn. So yeah, I have that added benefit. I'm able to do that. So I'm able to retain a lot more information that way. Now, I will say that if, the older videos I have, the less I remember from them. So if I'm going to debate on the topic, I'll go back and refresh myself on it. But I mean, and I do so many different topics that sometimes it's hard to remember. But that getting to edit the videos really does help.
Yeah, I could see that. Going on to another question, Zach Miller said, I would like to ask you both what you think is the best argument for God to be used when witnessing to a layperson. And I would say that for me personally, the best argument is going to be where that person's at. It depends what kind of questions somebody has with them. William Lane Craig's favorite argument is obviously the cosmological argument. Other people's favorite argument's the moral argument. I think that's the most effective gives an emotional punch. But I think that the different arguments form a cumulative case, and they each serve their own role. And it's our job to discern through the Holy Spirit where a person's at. And if somebody is more scientifically inclined, they might love something about the fine-tuning argument. If somebody is struggling with guilt, they might appreciate the moral argument. If somebody's struggling with beauty, we can talk about this argument from beauty or the argument from desire. So there's just different arguments for me. I look at evangelism, customizing it to where the person's at, asking them questions, figuring out where the Holy Spirit wants me to work versus just assuming an argument and sharing it with them. What about you, Michael?
I think it depends on the person. You have to use discernment. I think the moral argument is a good way to go. Sometimes the resurrection argument is pretty good if you're talking to a layperson. Sometimes you have to use a cumulative case, just a couple different arguments.
Yeah.
So witnessing to the person, sometimes talking about the reliability of scripture or the resurrection is a good way to go. It really depends on the person. It depends on who you're talking to. There's no one formula for everybody.
Yeah, that's really true. I mean, and I think the big thing is just starting to study these arguments. your hands around them, learn some of the different arguments, learn how they're used, learn how to repackage them in your own words, learn how to wrap story around them. I think that can be all healthy. When it comes to evangelism, for example, if we're going to talk to a Muslim, there's no sense I'm bringing out arguments for the existence of God. They already believe that God exists. So fortunately, we don't have to start there. What we might want to know how to deal there with is, are the Gospels reliable, or the nature of God? How we're not saying that God is three gods, right? Tritheism. So we can get into different issues. So knowing where people are at will kind of determine the subject matter by which we present to them. Here's another question that Jesse England brought up. He was asking, where do we disagree and agree theology wise? And I thought about that a little bit, and I thought, Michael and I haven't had a ton of time spending together. I'm curious, Michael, can you think of some things offhand where I know that Michael believes that the earth eternally existed. And just kidding.
No, I do not.
You can see his eyes.
No, I do not.
Let's not say that. Are you a theistic evolutionist? I think
definitely.
Yeah, I thought you were. So I'd say there's an area where there would be some disagreement on, but it wouldn't be something that I would look at Michael and think he's just a complete heretic. So that would be an area. Where are you on your? Are you a Molinist, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I would say that the things that I watch of your videos, I would see a lot of alignment, and I feel fed watching your videos, bro. They're really thought out, great research. You provide good scholarship, and I always just appreciate what you're putting out there. I get more excited about where we do align than where we would disagree in the areas where we disagree. Hey, we're two brothers come together and have this conversation right now. Can you think of anything where we would disagree off the top of your head besides maybe TE?
Well, everything that we would disagree on, right? I just know that. I would say that. Probably eschatology, because I'm a post-millennialist, so I don't believe there's going to be a future tribulation or antichrist. I think the church age will slowly bring about the millennial kingdom. So it's a long, drawn-out process kind of. So that's another area that people tend not to agree with me on. I understand that.
Have you taken the Enneagram, Michael?
Taking a what?
Have you taken the Enneagram?
I'm not sure what that is.
The Enneagram is kind of like a personal assessment, kind of let you know your personality type. And you can take it in 10 minutes and look it up. Maybe when we're together next week, we can chat about how you come out on that. Because I have some thoughts on that. You take some views that you're comfortable than most, just taking your stance and being committed about that. And if you feel you believe in something, even if it's a position that might be on the fringes a little bit, you seem to be okay with that. Some of that can be a really positive thing because you take people like Martin Luther, some of your good reformers that can do stuff. They have that little bit of edginess to their personality.
Hey, they're saying there's a really bad echo now on the live stream that we're repeating constantly. So there might be two audio sources coming in. Cool.
Okay. All right. Are we good?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay.
It just takes a second to fix it.
Yeah. So maybe you would want to take that test, Michael, and we can dialogue around that. And I think that can show a little bit, interestingly enough, the Enneagram, how our personality type can influence the way that maybe we see the world and the way that we make our decisions, kind of the whole thing with neuroscience that I know we're both interested in as well. Here's another question from Gabriel Ramses. What do you think of the popularity of atheism in the West? Can we compensate by growing in Africa, South America, and Asia, and maybe in Eastern Europe, but the population is not growing? Do you have a handle on what you think he's asking us there, Michael? And how would you?
Yeah, there's this idea that atheism is sort of growing in America and in Europe, and it is in a lot of parts. So he's asking, well, could we make up numbers? in Asia and all these other places. Well, we kind of are already. I mean, Christianity is growing like crazy in Africa, and so it's growing like crazy there, but and in China, of course. But I also want to remind people that a lot of what Christianity is sort of doing here is it's not so much declining as it is just sort of not growing as fast as it used to. There was a study that came out of Harvard that talked about like it's committed Christians, it's still growing strong. It's a lot of the cultural Christians that seem to be declining in that sense. So, I'm not too worried about it in that regard. The other thing to keep in mind is that it's been shown, and as it is now, atheists have historically low birth rates. So that's one of the interesting things here, is that because religious people tend to have higher birth rates, this is why atheism never really gets to take a strong foothold. So I'm not too much worried about that, because I also understand that the next generation is being raised by more committed Christians and less by cultural Christians. So yeah, and I think Christianity is still growing. I know a lot of people have said Christianity is really the world's first global religion. I mean, Islam is still mostly centered in the Middle East and in parts of Southeast Asia, whereas Christianity is a major religion on every continent now.
Yeah, well said. I mean, in some of the discussion comes up at times, well, why is it that people might be more influenced in the West toward atheism, in particular in Western Europe or in North America? And, there are thoughts about that as it relates to a culture heavily influenced by rationalism, the scientific method. All of this stuff can certainly be something that can influence our way of thinking. And scientism will obviously be something that tries to take the scientific method to an extreme, trying to solve everything by giving a scientific serve up as an answer. At the same token, I don't think that we have to look at the culture that we live in here in the West and think, oh man, Christianity is dying out. I mean, look at the new atheism. That's been something that thing took off with such a surge. And isn't it interesting how you don't hear as much about that anymore? And these were the fundamentalist atheists that were saying, you know what, Christianity, religion, it's going to go away. It's going to die. And now they're writing books. Atheists are writing books on what are the things that they can learn from religion, the sense of awe, the sense of the, how you come together in corporate community. And so now it's going to be, let's borrow the things that make the church effective, but just not use God, right?
Well, it's very hard to start a movement and keep it going on just sort of anti something else. And that's what new atheism really was. We're just anti-religion. We just don't want to have a set belief kind of thing. And it was also built on this idea that religion is harmful and needs to go away so society can advance. And there's so much science against that idea. It's unbelievable to suggest that religion is sort of bad for society. I mean, I debated Matt Dillahunty on this. I debated Aaron Ra on this. I debated a YouTube channel named Vegan Gains on this. And the amount of information on how beneficial religion is overwhelming. So it's hard to start a movement that sort of is built on one of their main pillars is that religion is harmful and needs to go away. And it isn't. So, I mean, that's going to really cripple their movement because they're going against the science on this.
Yeah, that's well said. It's sad how many people, find themselves leaving in the name of reading a book by Christopher Hitchens or Daniel Dennett or Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins. And sadly, a lot of times people leave and it's the unpaid bills of the church. We got to do our discipleship. We have to teach people, and people need to have to think with a worldview. They need to understand philosophy. They need to have some basic knowledge of logic and understanding how to think more pristinely so that they're not so easily buffeted by these viewpoints that come and go. I just got something a little bit ago that said that the voices are echoing, and then it looks like it's better now.
No, they fixed that. I saw that earlier. They fixed it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, we're good on that. Don't worry.
Okay. Good deal. Well, let's keep the conversation moving here. We have David J. Kerr. He said he has another question. What is our take on Ezekiel 39:9? Is this an end time prophecy or a battle that's already taken place? Michael.
Well, I don't think so. I could be an end times prophecy. But one thing we got to remember about Ezekiel is he uses a lot of hyperbole, a lot of exaggerated terms to sort of explain a lot of their current situation, like the Babylonian exile. Like take Ezekiel 28, Ezekiel 32:7-8. He
Right.
says, "When I put out your light, I will cover the heavens and make the stars dark. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon shall not give her light. And the bright lights of the heaven I will make dark over you, and bring darkness upon the land." Now, if you read the context, this is talking about Egypt. This was a judgment that passed on Egypt in the past, but we don't tend to think this is literally the stars stop shining. It's a lot of hyperbolic language. It's sort of like saying hell's going to freeze over. So in Ezekiel 33, you read commentators like Robert Alter, this is about their situation in exile in Babylon. And they're using a lot of hyperbole to sort of explain what's kind of going on there. And that happens a lot in the prophets. Like Joel, for example, talks about how the mountains are going to flow with sweet wine. I don't think we think literally the mountains are going to flow with wine. Yeah. So you just got to remember the context here. There's a lot of hyperbole being used in Jewish apocalyptic language.
Yeah, good question. Another question is from Travis Worth. Any plans for writing a book, Michael?
Yeah, but I'm probably going to get my degree in philosophy of science first, and then I'll publish a book on arguments for God's existence from a lot of modern data, like the arguments I've used, like cosmic conscious argument or the emergent universe argument.
Yeah. And I would say too, I've encouraged Michael the same thing, and I plan to spend more time talking to him about just continuing the pursuit of what he's doing, because God's gifted him with a great intellect, and getting these professional degrees is going to just go all the further with him. It's incredible what God's doing in his life right now through this, and he's getting great debates. But I think that the future is going to just blow open for him.
Thanks.
So, yeah, I really do, bud. Let's see here, bud. We got a super chat and from Daniel Apologetics. Thank you so much, man. That obviously means a ton. If I understand the question, age of people in Genesis, how do we explain that? It looks like you're asking whether Adam was really 900 plus years of age or not. So, Michael, as a theistic evolutionist, why don't you take a stab and then I'll share some thoughts.
Yeah, okay, so the best way to sort of address this, because I don't think they really were 900. The best way to address this is to go right to Abraham in Genesis 17, because he implies greatly that he didn't think his ancestors really lived that age. So if you do add up the ages in Genesis, Terah should have been 130 years old when Abraham was born. Okay, now go to Genesis 17. God comes to Abraham and says, "You're going to have a son." And Abraham laughs and says, "Shall a man who is 100 years old have a child?" Okay, he strongly implies that when you get to that age, you don't have kids anymore. If the ages are literal, he should have been like, "Yeah, of course, God, that's normal. My father did that. There's nothing wrong with that." Abraham is the first man in Scripture to be called an old man, and he died at 175. But if the ages are literal in Genesis, one of his ancestors, Eber, would have outlived him. So no, I don't think the ages are literal, and I think Scripture implies that they are. These are symbolic numbers used to sort of give symbolic meaning. So go to Matthew chapter 1. He is fudging numbers to make sure there are exactly 42 generations between Abraham and Jesus. There weren't actually. He leaves out some generations. He duplicates one. But he's using numbers for theological messaging. Likewise, the ages in Genesis are probably the same thing. They're given specific numbers for theological messaging. For example, if you take all of the ages from Adam to Moses and you add them up, you get 12,600. Now, that's an important symbolic number because a derivative of that, 1,260, shows up in Revelations as like a preparation time for God. So I think it's talking about how Adam was exiled, but Moses brings the people of God back into the promised land, so they're no longer in exile. They're using the ages to sort of get to that symbolic number, for example. So talk about Abraham, talk about the symbolic messaging that we see throughout the Bible of using numbers and ages to sort of get there. I don't think they really lived at that age, especially within the cultural context.
So I think what's helpful about, hearing, Michael's perspective here is just you get this case that he's going to present that's going to see this as more symbolically. And obviously, the literal numbers are going to be believed by many people, and probably more predominantly on a popular level. And then you'll see more people, on a scholarly level, they'll kind of roll over and be willing to take these numbers, if they take them at all, to be symbolic. So, the conversation is open, but there's people who will be on
Genesis 1 to 11. And I addressed that in my video on Genesis 5 and my video again on Genesis 6.
Yeah, I've seen that. So on your page, that's good. I think we got another question in from Nathaniel Franco. He said, for Michael, his biggest piece of advice for somebody planning on majoring in philosophy, getting into deciding if this is the correct major for me.
Just no, there's no jobs in that area. So
yeah,
I wanted to get a philosophy degree, but I would have probably got out of college and just had to go work at Starbucks or something. There's not a high demand for philosophers right now. Now, if you're a Christian, that gives you kind of a little bit of a heads up, because you could sort of go to work for churches, ministry organizations, that kind of thing. It's a lot harder for like an atheist or a non-believer too, because there's not a sort of network there. So you kind of have a leg up there. I would recommend maybe majoring in something else, and then maybe doing like philosophy as like a minor. If you're dead set on it and you don't want to do anything else, then just do it and not worry about the money, and not worry about what's going to happen. You could always start a YouTube channel. It's going to take a while to build, trust me. But I mean, there are ways to do it. If you're hard to set on it, do it. If you're doing it because you think you're going to become like a leading scholar at Oxford, there's a lot of people competing for that. So just understand the playing field. But if your heart is dead set on it and you really feel like God is calling you there, then do it.
Yeah, I can say that it will take a pound of flesh. That was the advice that I got. I finished up my dissertation. I'm preparing to go defend my viva in England in a few months to get a PhD in philosophy of religion. And I can say that it is agonizing, just because it's tons of technical work and it takes a lot of time. And I was trying to do that while leading a large church, writing books, doing videos, the woman apologist, traveling around speaking.
Mm-hmm.
It just is overwhelming. I would say that, and it is hard to get jobs in that. Like for me, the whole reason that I went and got is I didn't see myself being a professor in a university. I've got 3 theological degrees, right? I got my master's of theology from Dallas Seminary, did Bible college degree, and then I got a doctorate of ministry and apologetics. And I thought, man, it would help me with debating if I can go to a secular university, or it helped me to do stuff, to not just be written off as, oh, he's just been to evangelical schools. And so some of that motivation was, I want to be able to minister to as many people as possible without obstacle. And that was some of the motivation for that. And so I'd say making sure you have a good topic, what do you want to do with it, is a big thing. Not everybody, some people are writers, some people are speakers. And I would say it's good if you can have some good theological foundation going into a philosophy degree. But it's also good to have some good philosophy to help you to do your theology, as it's the handmaiden to theology. Anything else you wanted to add to that, bud?
Nope.
Okay, so we have another super chat, it looks like. Jay Shy, praise the Lord, thank you. He said, Mike, could you tell us when your next debate is and what the topic is? Also, do you still plan on responding to Apologia? Apologia. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me who Apologia is.
Yeah. Well, first, my next debate will be in just south of Toronto, in a place called Hamilton, at Redeemer College University, I think is what it's called. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong on that title, but I'll be debating someone named Dr. Joe Boot on if evolution is compatible with Genesis or the Bible in general. So if you're in that area, you can always come out and hang out there. It'll be February 12th at that college. I think it's Redeemer Bible College or Redeemer College University. I know it's like College University something. So yeah, that's going on. I'm still trying to set up that debate with Michael Shermer that I challenged him on back in December. I said I could do it mid-March. I still haven't heard back from David Smalley. So I'm going to keep bothering him about that because I really want to do that. Yeah, and it's an easy topic for me. So I'm happy to do it. So hoping
What's
that
the topic
happens.
that you wanted to debate Shermer on?
Is religion beneficial or harmful? Because he tweeted out that, studies show that atheists are more like better at this and better at that. And I'm like, and I knew what studies he was referring to. So I was like, you want to debate the topic with me? Because I know what's going to happen. But like he said something like atheists are less racist. And I know exactly what study he's referring to. And I know he probably didn't read it. I could be wrong. He may actually read it, but the way he tweeted out made me think, I don't know if he read this or he knows what the study actually says and the intricacies of it. In terms of apologia, so the history behind that is David Wood had me on his channel to respond to one of his videos on the morality challenge and talk about the moral argument. We did. Apologia made a response. The problem with his responses, and again, I like Paul. I think he's a great guy. He's fun to talk with, and I don't have anything against him. But he didn't. He kind of also tried to respond to my series on ethics and the moral argument, and I know he didn't watch it in full because a lot of what he said in his video was already addressed in the series, like my video, A Critique of Natural Moral Realism, or my video, Is God the Same as the Good? He also, the one thing I also say about ethics is it's hard to really, it's really easy to get confused in that or misunderstand what someone is saying because ethics is a very, 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 very hard subject. So I don't think he's, I don't fault him for that or anything like that. I still sometimes have hard times wording things here and there. But a lot of what he said in that is, ironically, it's already addressed in my full series. So I might write up a short little response if I have time in February. The problem is I'm just getting really, really busy right now, and it's hard to keep up with everything. Like in the beginning of March, I'll be in Orange County to give a TED Talk. So a lot of stuff coming up.
Yeah, that's great. You're going to be coming into OC. Got to drop on by, bro. Got to go out to the ocean.
It would be at Charleston. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
No, you said when you go out to Orange County.
Oh yeah, that's right. You live out there. That's right,
bro.
Oh, I'm sorry about all the taxes and all that. It must be horrible.
Yeah, that's true. But you know what? I was just thinking, since your channel's doing so good, maybe you can pay my taxes this year.
You're funny. That's adorable. Maybe if my channel did good for 10 years, I could pay a month worth of your taxes.
Oh man. Tell me about apologia.
Oh, he's an atheist, ex-Christian. I think he was a Mennonite, lives in Canada. He's up, I think Nova Scotia or somewhere around. I don't know exactly, but he's an atheist. He responds a lot on the resurrection argument. I've seen a lot of his videos, disagree with a lot of his arguments. If you want to check out his resurrection stuff, he replies to the resurrection. He's one of the few atheists I appreciate because he actually tries to apply to the, he doesn't try to, do the whole dismissal thing like miracles can't happen, therefore the resurrection can't happen. Like I see sometimes with atheists, so they don't offer an alternative explanation. Paul actually did offer alternative theories, like naturalistic theories, to explain away the resurrection. If you want to look at a good reply, check out Braxton Hunter, who did a reply to him on that. Great reply by Braxton. So I was thinking of actually writing up a blog response to him, and then I saw that Braxton responded, and I'm like, okay, great, he did it. I don't have to now. Awesome.
Yeah, you're like, this is good. Okay, so we have a question that came in, another one from Isaiah. Is there any evidence that Jesus existed, or is he just a myth like atheists like to argue? The reality is a lot of atheists don't argue that. That is not a common belief out there. Some people will get into this whole idea that Jesus is a myth, but didn't you do something recently, Michael, a video on this, or I can't remember if I saw something.
Well, I've been going through a series on Jesus mysticism and the copycat claims, like was Jesus similar to Baal, or was Jesus similar to like Serapis and all that stuff. And I basically finished it for a while because I hit all the main ones.
Yeah.
But I did a debate a couple of years ago with a guy named Godless Engineer, which I always refer people to when they want to see the arguments for Jesus mysticism, because I thought that debate went exceptionally well. If you read some of the comments, I even got people out of Jesus mysticism from that debate alone. So it was a really good debate. But the atheists that argue this are in such a minority view that other atheists mock them and easily debunk their arguments. It's really, and if you want to, it's just so bad. Like, because Paul talks about Jesus as a real person. It says in Romans 1, he was a descendant from David. In Galatians, he was born of a woman. And there are external sources like Tacitus and Josephus, which talk about Jesus as a real historical person. There's a great website called History for Atheists. It's run by an atheist named Tim O'Neill. And Tim O'Neill doesn't like Jesus Mysticis, and he's a great charismatic writer who's kind of funny. Even sometimes when you read him, it's hard to write and be funny. He can write and be funny, and so he's got a great articles just debunking Jesus mysticism, going after the leading proponents like David Fitzgerald and Richard Carrier, and I love his work for that. And so check out that kind of stuff. I'll probably eventually start doing a series. My next series on Jesus mysticism will be going through each external source. So I'm going to do an entire video on the passage in Tacitus, one on Josephus, and one in like Lucian, and just show how this is a reliable account kind of thing.
When you think about just the last 20 years and some of the things that come and go, like Richard Carrier, he was being talked about for a while there and then cools off. We already mentioned kind of the new atheists, they're kind of cooling off. I think back to 15 years ago at Dan Brown and his Da Vinci Code, and you get, Pagels and, these different writers talking about the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Judas or, the Gospel of Philip, and all this stuff comes out and these massive buzzes go, and you think like the world's going to be revolutionized. And what's crazy is like the gospel keeps going, that's what we see happening. Like, there's a lot of debate going on in the church about some of these different nuances of what it is that, Christians might believe. But at the end of the day, it's not coming and going. It's not a fad that Jesus died and rose again. But some of these other movements just pop up and come and go. I'm so thankful for a belief that we have that doesn't do that. Now we have Jasmine. Yeah. Did you want to add to that, bro?
I would just say I'm kind of a little happy for the atheist movement, because I think it's sort of sharpening and refining the church, making the church more intelligent. Because for so many years, the church didn't have an excuse to research and study these things because it was just sort of like the dominant cultural view and no one was really challenging it. Yeah. Now that the atheist movement is sort of challenging the church, it's sort of forcing Christians to read and study these things and start to search out these answers. And I think that's great. So there's a silver lining to the atheist movement. Let's keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. And it's the same thing with the discussion going on in the church today where, we got a lot of young people who are leaving, or, a lot of people are going to walk away from the church because they're not resonating. Well, that might be hard if the church numbers shrink, but the reality is you're going to have a purer bride. A lot of the people that are just hanging out there aren't really a part of it anyway. So when some of the people go away, so there is the silver lining to a lot of these things. And that's a good point to bring out. Jasmine asks, when is it a good time to witness? I mean, if I'm new and learning and studying, like 3 months, should I just shy away, even though I know that I know Jesus is Lord, but maybe can't express so great?
I would say be as wise as a serpent and as gentle as a dove. You won't know, but again, it's different for every circumstance. Just pay attention to what's going on around you, discern the situation, and act accordingly. There's not some people, I know some people I talk to that are just not open. So, what's the point? They're not. I'll wait for when God says the moment is right. So you just got to discern the moment.
Yeah, I think as well as it relates to sharing the gospel, one of the things that you see in the scriptures is an eagerness to get out and start sharing immediately. Now, we have to understand that they had a context that was just mission ripe from the standpoint that they were the followers of Jesus. They were being discipled by him. Jesus was modeling it. It was common for people to talk about their ideas in public. And so it might look a little bit different, more conversational, more relational versus standing up and preaching. But yeah, Jesus would heal people and they'd want to go and share. And so there's something about getting saved that makes us want to share. The danger is we can turn people off if we start getting frustrated and mad at them for not believing. We need to realize that everybody's on their own journey, and we can talk to people about what it is we believe, and we just own our ignorance. None of us have it all figured out, and be okay with that.
I do.
What'd you say?
I have it all figured. I was joking. I said,
Yeah.
You said we don't have it figured out.
Yeah, Michael's got it all figured out, but no, I'll say, man, I got into this whole thing called apologetics because I was doing evangelism, and I didn't know how to answer people's questions. Their questions just became the Holy Spirit study guide for me, and I'd go home and I'd look that up. And so sometimes when people say, oh, apologetics isn't important. They're just revealing how little evangelism they're doing, because if we get out there and start doing it, people will ask us questions and we'll be challenged to figure out an answer for it. Gerald Chua said, is your view on creation, I guess, what is your view on creation literary framework? Michael, you want to talk about the literary framework?
So I think he's talking about the framework hypothesis.
Yeah.
So this is a part of my view, and what it basically is, if you look at Genesis 1, and you look at day 1 and then day 4, yeah, you'll see that on day 1 the light is created. On day 4 the luminaries are created. On day 2 the sky and the sea are created. On day 5 the creatures that fill those domains are created. Same with day 6 and 3. And so some scholars have sort of argued that, there's some sort of framework kind of going on here. Maybe it's not chronological order. Now, I agree. I agree with some of Mark Smith's criticisms of it. But I do think I do agree that general framework in that sense is interesting and sticks out. So it is a part of my view. It's not my end all be all view. I think the authors of Genesis 1 were just trying to be symmetrical. So they weren't writing in like a chronological order. They were trying to use 7 days to sort of paint creation in an ordered structure. So yeah, I take aspects of that view, but it's not my end all, final all, be all view. My final end all, be all view is probably the temple inauguration view.
Yeah, I've read some of the Walton stuff on that recently, and there's just some really good insights as it relates to the literary framework or the framework hypothesis. That it is interesting the way you see it stylized there. It just helps us to be slower, to look at the different views, to not be ultra wooden, to not be overly black and white, because there clearly often is some real literary nuance and art taking place. And it takes time to understand the way that the genre was understood in the ancient milieu as well. Here's a question for you, Michael, that I saw came in from Travis Lee. He wants to know, can the fine-tuning argument be added to the digital physics argument, which would show that information was uploaded at the BB, similar to uploading a
Big
disk?
Bang.
Yep. Big Bang.
Yeah, Big Bang. Yeah. So just for clarity, the digital physics argument is an argument I employ a lot. It's one of my favorites. And basically it argues that a lot of modern data has shown that our universe that we call space-time is really emergent. It's not some sort of fundamental thing that exists. It's sort of like emergent from some sort of underlying reality, which we argue is God. So that's the digital physics argument in a nutshell. And yeah, the fine-tuning evidence can be used to strengthen that. Definitely. I would of course suggest that. The reason why I don't use it that often is because when I'm debating atheists, I'm typically debating atheists that have heard of the fine-tuning before. And they sort of hear it so much that they just become sort of dead or numb to it, to the point where it doesn't even affect them anymore, even though it's still really good evidence. So I'm always sort of trying to adjust my arguments to who I'm talking to sort of get through to them as best as I can.
Yeah, that's good to be able to have different ways to be able to, strengthen an argument and utilize different tools to be able to kind of bring home what you want to bear. Michael, here's a question that we had for us. Have we dealt with doubt, and how did you overcome it or work through it? Have you struggled with any doubt before?
Well, of course. I mean, who doesn't? If you don't, you're denying, the reality of it all. I mean, everyone struggles with doubt. Jeremiah 17:9 says the heart is desperately wicked and deceitful. And that's just the truth of it. And doubt. And because of that, we will experience doubt. How I deal with doubt is I remind myself, quite frankly, in all the conversations I've had, the atheists still do not offer better explanations to the resurrection. They don't offer good replies to my arguments for God's existence. I just see my recent debate with Matt Dillahunty. I mean, there was no challenge of the premises. See his debate with Braxton Hunter. He directly asked Dillahunty, "Are you offering an alternative explanation to the resurrection?" And Dillahunty said no, because they don't have any. So it's like all the evidence supports our side, and that's what I hold onto. Until an atheist actually offers a better explanation for the resurrection or the arguments for God's existence, that's what I stand on. It's the knowledge of God. It's the knowledge that God has given us that it shows that he is real and that his word is true. And the atheist arguments tend to just be, arguing from possibility or from doubt and these types of things, which are just not convincing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've struggled with doubts. I've had a season in my life that was horrific, probably 3 or 4 years deep in it, as a pastor and an apologist, struggling through it. But it wasn't the kind of doubt where I was enjoying it or wanting to have it or trying to be like an emergent church kind of a person. I was reading so much of the toughest arguments against the Christian faith that I found myself not able to track down answers to my questions fast enough. In other words, I was producing questions faster than I could track down the answer. I mean, anybody can come up with a question. It takes time to get a solid answer. And so what was happening as I was getting all these questions, I had to come to a place where I had to renegotiate my faith stance. How do I live for the Lord and not make it about getting all of my questions answered? And what I said so many times is doubt is not a Christian problem. It's a human problem. In the absence of certainty, there'll always be room for doubt. The question is, which worldview best closes the doubt gap? And I ended up writing a book on it called Doubting Toward Faith. God would bring me through a horrific dark night of the soul. I mean, I ended up on antidepressants. I wanted to be at the bottom of a lake. I was so depressed. I mean, it got so bad because I prepared my whole life, adult life, for ministry, was doing ministry, and I didn't know where else to go. I mean, nothing else looked attractive. I was just struggling. Agnosticism for a season looked attractive because I could just sit in critics' corner. But then I had to even think to myself, even the agnostic, they're certain about something. They know something. They know that the universe has an explanation. They're just not sure what it is. So I'd rather give my life to the best explanation instead of just saying you can never know the explanation. And, as Michael was talking about, it's all about the resurrection for me. The way that I ended up walking out of some of this is if Jesus rose from the grave, then he did die. And if he did die, he did live. And when he lived, he affirmed the Old Testament. And he said that he was going to die and rise again. And so a lot of the questions that I wrestle with, if Jesus rose from the grave, then that's good enough for me. And that began to help me out of that. And a lot of times we're experiencing horrific angst as it relates to doubts over things that the early church wasn't even wrestling with. Look, if John the Baptist could struggle with doubt as the cousin of Jesus, the one who baptized Jesus, the one who said, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world," how much more are we susceptible to doubting 2,000 years later with over 40,000 denominations? So don't feel bad for it. The good news is Jesus can handle our doubts, right? What did Jesus say to John's disciples? Go tell John, the deaf hear, the lame walk, the blind see. And he says, "Behold, I tell you, no one's been born greater of a woman than John." Jesus pays his greatest compliment to a human on the heels of his doubts to John the Baptist. Anything else you'd want to add to our audience as it relates to that, bud?
No, I think that was good.
Okay. Tim, are you there, buddy? Okay. I'm going to invite Tim Hull, our executive producer at the 1 Minute Apologist, to come in, and he's going to hang out with Michael and kind of ask some questions of Michael in the remaining time and banter. I actually am going to a dinner at Brett Kunkel, a Christian apologist, a friend of mine. I'm heading over there right now. And I'm so thankful to have had an hour to hang out with you, Michael. Looking forward to seeing you next week, bro. Great job. And Tim, man, just take it from here, bro. Yeah. Hey, and by the way, we'll be talking to David Wood. My PhD research is in the area of guilt and the moral argument. And David is an interesting person to have on because he is a psychopath, right? He went to prison for trying to take his father's life. He ends up getting saved. He doesn't feel guilt, but he can recognize it. And I'm going to be asking him some questions in that arena as well as a bunch of other things. So hope to see you on. Hey, you guys have a good time. Thanks, Michael, again.
Yeah, thank you. So you there, Tim? All right. Tim's got to fix the stuff. Because fix the stuff, Tim. Come on, Tim, fix the stuff. So, while you're in that, I'll just one question. Abraham Gert, given that Jesus always did miracles for people so that they would believe, is it reasonable to conclude that believing in evidence is an essential part of Christianity? Yes. Yes. You basically answer the young question. Yes, absolutely. So, absolutely. And so, remember, a lot of those questions are pretty easy to answer if you just think about what you're asking. So, don't think too much about it. Sometimes you don't need someone to tell you. Use your critical thinking there.
No,
Cherry
good.
Picker said, was God asking Israel to bow to the king and Nebuchadnezzar in Jeremiah 27:8-12? No, the Hebrew word more like serving, and that God saying you're going to serve Babylon for a duration of time. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, God says you to serve these people. Jesus was serving. He calls other people to serve as well. So no, it's not about bowing down in that sense, like sort of worship. It's more just serving in that sense.
I switched to a different view, and I'm going to see if that improves our lagging a bit, trying to do trial and error here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we got a little bit of time. Cool. So if you would, I would love to talk a little about, since the questions are, I think we've hit most of the questions, tell me a little bit more from your perspective about the debate with Dillahunty. We'll go a few minutes of just to get the inside information. So, what were your...
Yeah, so over the weekend, I went to Austin, Texas to debate Matt Dillahunty, who's a very popular atheist speaker, Atheist Experience a lot, and we went to the Atheist Experience studio right there in Austin. So, right into the line, everyone was really nice. They were very friendly. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, no one was rude whatsoever. They were really great. So, hats off to them. So going to the debate, it was on, are there good reasons to believe that God exists? And, I was looking forward to it. I was nervous because Matt is a very, very talented speaker. So he is very, he's very quick on his feet. He's very charismatic, very good coming up with explanations or answers right then and there. So I was a little nervous about that. So I was researching very meticulously, trying to get as much information as I could ready because I knew what I was going into. I got there, and unfortunately, he's never even watched any of my videos before the debate. He didn't know anything about me, and so I knew my arguments might catch him off guard a little bit, and they sure did. I thought the debate went exceptionally well. It was better than I had hoped for. He didn't have a lot of good replies to my arguments, and so, I mean, for the most part, after the debate, some atheists have been saying I've been misrepresenting the data on neuroscience or quantum mechanics, and reading their comments shows they don't understand my arguments or quantum mechanics at all. Like today, some atheist said that I misrepresented the studies on consciousness and anesthesia, and he was saying that anesthesia shows that the brain, you could use anesthesia to shut off consciousness in the brain. And I was like, well, no, not really, because, there are actually some studies which show that consciousness is still present in anesthesia. So I didn't get to use that, but I mean, so, this idea that the argument seems to be after, so I just didn't understand the data. The study I'm referring to is called, the argument just seems to be that I don't understand the data, but I mean, they're not really giving long explanations for that, or they're cherry picking what I said in that regard. So overall, I'm fairly happy with how it happened, and I think it was great.
Awesome. I do want to go back to that. We just super chat in, so I want to make sure that we jump that to the front of the line as far as questions go. And this might land you into some hot water. I think you're reading it right now. What do you think about mocking a Muslim's prophet while reaching out to them like David Wood does, especially in light of the context of 1 Peter 3:15? So how would you respond to the Islamicize me and the boom boom room and kind of just the methodology that David and his team uses?
I mean, I'm not so much for that method, but I'm also not against it. I'm kind of neutral on that. I don't really know where to go on that. It's also, that's more of his field. I wouldn't do that with atheists because I feel like it wouldn't really be a good witness to them. But again, I don't know what it is with Muslims. I don't have a lot of respect for Muhammad or some of the things he's done. I think it's worthy of mockery in that sense. So there are arguments to be made either way, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and just real quick, on the 1 Minute Apologist channel, we did have David Wood and Vocab Malone kind of give some supporting evidence, some biblical evidence for a satirical or mocking